Hello, today we are going to be talking about the subject of social justice. And that phrase, social justice, is really a loaded term in today's culture wars. It sounds like it would be something that everyone would agree on and be supportive of, but the reality is it's a little more controversial than that. So we are going to be looking at that concept today and trying to also understand why it's a controversial issue. Okay, so social justice, what does that mean? Well, let's break it down. Let's look at the second word first, justice. So what is justice? Well, we could say that justice is doing what is right and fair. Okay, that's probably true. Now, beyond that, we probably want to know a little bit more because that doesn't get us really far. And for thousands of years, philosophers and political scientists and theologians have been talking about what justice is and how we should define it and how we should understand it. And what we've realized is it's a really tricky matter. It's really hard to get a precise notion of what justice looks like. Lots of disagreements on that fact. I think for the most part, though, we all have an inkling of basically what it is, but figuring it out exactly, we found to be rather difficult. So let's just take a quick look at a few different examples. Someone gets busted for drunk driving. Okay, we want justice to be served in that situation. But what is justice? If someone is drunk driving and this is their first time that they've been caught, what would justice look like? Should they go to jail? How long should they go to jail for? Should they lose their license? For how long should they lose their license? And these are the sorts of things that play out, and people have different opinions about what justice would look like in these situations. There are some people who want to come down harder and some people who want to be more sympathetic, and they're going to define what justice looks like differently. On a college campus, if there is a student who is accused of sexual assault, what would justice look like there? What would justice look like as the investigation unfolds? What would justice look like in a hearing in terms of witnesses? If this is an on-campus hearing, can they have attorneys? Can they have witnesses? What is the standard by which a person would be found guilty? These are other concerns. And then what would the appropriate punishment be for that person? Suspension, expulsion, recommendation for criminal charges. So in these situations, again, what that looks like is a little bit tricky to get a handle on. Or if we take the example of murder, right? If someone commits first-degree murder, what would justice look like? Should that person be executed? Is the death penalty just? You're going to have some people who say, yeah, that's what justice looks like. An eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. Someone commits first-degree murder, they should receive the death penalty. And other people are going to say, no, that's not just. We don't have to kill people, and if we don't have to kill people and we can keep them in prison, that is what's preferable, that's what's right, and that's what's fair. So we can see that we all have an orientation towards doing what's right or trying to get a handle on what the right punishment and penalty and reward should be for certain situations. But the details are kind of hard to work out. We don't always agree on that. Now, there are those cynics out there who are going to say, well, justice is just the dominant social norm on punishments and rewards for different actions. And okay, oops. All right, hold on. Sorry about that. That was my mom. Remind me to call her back after we're done. Okay, so yeah, we were saying there are some people who are just cynical and just say justice is a social norm that different societies make up, and it's just whatever your society has picked. The thing is that with the cynics, you can make that argument, but I think that most of the time, most of those cynics don't even really believe that themselves, that they, the way they live and the way they act suggests that they really do believe that there is some notion of justice out there beyond just what a society happens to say it is, whether it's the United States or Nazi Germany or China, or whatever. But we're not here to talk about the cynics, so never mind. Okay, so we have a basic notion of what justice is, right? Justice is doing what is right and what is fair, and what that looks like, that's a little tricky. Okay, Social, right? That's the other part of the phrase, social justice. So when we talk about social justice, we're not talking about criminal justice, right? So I was using some examples from criminal justice. So we're not talking about when people commit criminal acts and what justice looks like there. Here we're talking about the social context for justice. And I think we can think about that in terms of the benefits and the burdens and relationships within society. That we're talking about justice with regard to those sorts of things. So if we're talking about hiring people, right? If you're hiring people for a job, what are the expected notions of doing that fairly, right? What role can different aspects play? Can race play a role in that? Should it or shouldn't it? If we look at college admissions, it's the same sort of question. What would be right and fair when a college or university is handling its admissions process? And so again, you can see where people would have some disagreements, but this is a social context. Taxes, right? Taxes have to do with benefits and burdens. Taxes and social welfare programs, right? As those things play out. So what would justice look like, right? We all say the wealthy should pay their fair share of taxes. Does anyone disagree with that? I didn't think so. But what is the fair share, right? What percentage of their income is fair? And should the poor pay any federal income tax? Should they have to pay at least a little bit? Or should they not have to pay any? And so also what sort of social welfare programs should be available and how much assistance should people have? And so these are questions that have to do with justice with regard to the benefits and burdens and relationships within society. I'm going to use one other example that I like to use in these discussions, the minimum wage, right? So the minimum wage, we can look at that as a social justice issue. And there are some people who say what is fair and right is to raise the minimum wage from where it is right now. We need a higher minimum wage. And their concern is that poor members of society have sufficient money, a sufficient income to take care of themselves and their family. And they think that that is the right and fair thing to do. And they want to do what's right and fair. And other people are saying, no, we don't want to raise the minimum wage because if we do that, we're going to price people out of the job market, right? People are going to lose their jobs and the price of everything is going to go up. And so these people are making a different economic argument, but they're also concerned with what's right and that's what's fair. And then you get the people who say there should be no minimum wage. And their argument is, look, the government doesn't have the right to come in and tell two people who are trying to reach an agreement about an exchange of compensation for services, what that should be, what standard that has to meet, that's not the government's role. And so they can make this argument. They're concerned with what's fair and right. So in all these cases, we see that when we talk about social justice, we're talking about these sorts of issues and trying to do what's right and fair with regard to them. So that's what social justice is, right? And who could object to that, right? We all want to pursue social justice, but we also recognize that it's a little tricky to figure out just what it looks like. Now, let's get into a little bit why this is controversial beyond just the obvious difficulty of figuring out what's right and fair in a society. Sometimes I'll ask students to go out looking for definitions of social justice. And sometimes I get answers back where people will say, social justice is treating everyone equally, regardless of their characteristics, right? Treating everyone equally, that's what's right. And that sounds good, right? You're like, yay, treating everyone equally, that's great. But we don't really want that. And what's a little bit ironic is that I found that a lot of times the people suggesting that social justice should be treating everyone the same are the ones who actually want the least of that. So let's look at a couple issues. If you have a student in school, public school, who has dyslexia, is it acceptable for the school to use additional resources to provide services to help that student with her learning disability? Is it acceptable to give her extra time taking tests because of this challenge that she has? Most of us would say, yeah, that's fine. That's good. That's fair. That's the right thing to do. But we're not treating her the same as everyone else. We're treating her differently. We're extending additional resources to help her. We're giving her additional time to take tests. And most of us would say that's the right thing to do in that case. Affirmative action. right? Affirmative action, sometimes people think that's one thing, but affirmative action is actually a host of different approaches to attaining more fairness in hiring and in college admissions. So people have different opinions about that. Is that fair? It's certainly not treating people equally. But if a company says, we want to figure out how we can reach out to different communities to get a more ethnically diverse pool of applicants by reaching out to this community and making them aware of jobs that we have available. That's treating people differently, but a lot of people would say, yeah, that's fine, that's good. So there are different affirmative action approaches that lots of people want to get behind, but they're not treating everyone equal. And then taxes, I made reference to taxes earlier. Do we want to treat everyone equally? Do we want to say everyone should pay the same percentage of their income in federal income tax? Everyone should pay whatever that is, 10%, 15%, 20%, whatever it is, everyone pays the same. Some people want to do that, but very few really do. Most of us want to have a graduated income tax so that the people who have the highest income pay the highest percentage of their income, and people at the bottom may pay none, right? And that's what we have in the United States today with federal income tax. State doesn't always work that way, depending on the state that you live in. But at the federal level, most of us want a graduated income tax. That's not treating everyone the same. That's saying the poor should pay a lesser percentage, if any, and the wealthy should pay a higher percentage. And so that's the right thing to do. That's the fair thing to do, according to lots of people. And so that's not treating everyone equally. So treating everyone equally doesn't really work. Okay, so then why is social justice such a loaded term, right? Why is it that when people talk about social justice, there are some who are like, yay, that's what I'm about, and other people who just roll their eyes, right, and get annoyed about the whole conversation. Why is it so loaded? Well, social justice as a phrase has been adopted by the political left for their political agenda. Right? When you go out and encounter people talking about social justice, it is by and large used by people on the left to refer to their own political agenda. Now, whether that political agenda is good or bad or mixed, right, depends on where you're coming from. We all have our opinions on these things, and that's fine. But when people talk about social justice, they're not talking about it in the abstract, the way we've been talking about it, but very often they're saying, well, it is these particular approaches to these social issues. And these are, by and large, left-wing political approaches to these issues. Are they right? Are they wrong? That's up for you to do. That's up to you to decide. So this is why it gets a little controversial. So someone goes into a church for the first time and they're sitting in the pew and wondering, is this a church for me? And the pastor, the priest gets up there and says, our church is committed to social justice, and that's a big priority for us here in our community. Well, what some people are going to hear, if they're not on the left, but if they're in the center or on the right, they're going to think, well, this church is about political action that isn't in line with my own political ideology. This doesn't seem like the place for me. And so, first of all, they may think that churches shouldn't be about politics that much. But second of all, they're going to say, well, this church has stated that it's really about these particular approaches to social justice issues. Not about just a general approach to attaining what is fair and right, but a particular political agenda. And that's going to trouble people. On universities, this is where it plays out a lot, right? So universities have social justice offices or offices that are oriented towards these concerns, and people working for the university administrators who are about social justice. And many students are like, that's great, and I want to be involved in that, right? Especially if their own political ideology lines up with the agenda of these offices and these administrators and personnel involved there. However, if you're not on the left, if you're in the center or the right, then even if you care about issues of justice in society and want to be active, it's not going to be a context where you feel that your perspectives are welcome and things play out this way. So This is why social justice as a term on the one hand is completely neutral and good, but the way that it's used in society is a particular approach to social justice issues, which makes some people happy and comfortable and leaves others feeling not so happy and not so comfortable. And so if universities really want to embrace diversity of perspectives and be inclusive of people of all perspectives, what do they have to do? They have to say, well, yeah, we pursue issues of social justice. Now let's hear what different people have to say. Let's try to hash these out and make some progress. And this is what leads us to the final concern on colleges and university campuses with issues of social justice. I think that there's a lot of people out there, and I've heard some people speaking about this issue, and they say what college should be about, what universities should be about, is the pursuit of truth. And that involves the continual struggle to ascertain what justice looks like, the continual struggle between individuals, within individuals, trying to balance competing notions of what's fair and right to try to get to the truth. It's the constant struggle to get to the truth. However, if a university's agenda becomes about, let's say, teaching the students the right way to look at social norms, then there are people who are going to be concerned about that. That the university shouldn't be teaching people, here is the right way to approach these social issues. Now let's go do that. But rather challenging the students to engage these very difficult issues, these perennial issues, and to engage with one another and to engage with great scholars and with books and treatises and things that have been around for thousands of years for this struggle to attain truth, rather than being told this is the right thing to do. So let me conclude with this thought. This is perhaps a little bit of my own bias, but when we're talking about justice, whether this is criminal justice or social justice, or whatever we're trying to do in a college or university environment to get a handle on justice, we should always be seeking to attain justice, but we should always be very wary of any claims to have grasped it. I'm going to say that one more time, try to do that a little more clearly. Right? When it comes to justice, we should always be seeking to ascertain what justice is, but we should also be very wary of any claims of anyone to have fully grasped it. Okay, so that's our discussion of social justice today. I hope that you found it thought-provoking, and please feel free to share any thoughts below or in contacting me directly. So have a good day, and always remember to do what is right and fair.